Okay, and welcome. I think we are starting to approach critical mass here. We'll just give it one more minute while people are getting their audio connected. Welcome to the Tableau Credit Union User Group as a part of the Credit Union Analytics community. Anybody who is just signing in, please feel free to put questions in the Q&A if you use the button on the Zoom controls. If you received this through a forward or you haven't received an invitation before, feel free to use the link on the screen if you want to sign up for future updates. We will send those out. It's about every other month, although this month it is our second in a row, actually third in a row. We will be starting in just a moment. We are recording and we'll send out the slides and the recording afterwards in the next day or two. So stay tuned, hold tight, and we'll be beginning in just a moment. Okay, I think we're ready to go. Welcome. As I said, if you've been waiting on the phone, welcome to the Credit Union Tableau User Group. We're a part of the Credit Union Analytics community, and we do welcome everybody regardless of platform. We today have a great topic, data centralization, driving analytics through integration, and two fabulous speakers. We've got Knowlton, who's the founder and CEO of the Knowlton Group, and Nicole Lopez, who runs business intelligence at Logix Federal Credit Union out in presumably sunny Burbank, California. I am Charlotte Taft. I am the Senior Director of Business Intelligence at Callahan Associates and have the honor of coordinating these events. I do just want to reiterate that if you ever have questions about the group or you have an idea for something you'd like to hear about more, anything related thereof, please just feel free to shoot me an email, LinkedIn, whatever you prefer. We are always looking for content and for ideas for content. A couple quick announcements before we get to our speakers. In terms of spring 2021 events, we do not have things on the books yet, but we are planning for April and June user groups. So stay tuned for that. Again, I have in the chat put the link to make sure if you are not already on our mailing list, to make sure you get invites in the future. As I know, this has been forwarded around quite a bit this month. Probably many of you are already aware, but we are in the run up to the 2021 CU Lytics Summit, which I believe is the 6th ever. And just wanted to make an announcement because this really is one of the flagship events in terms of the analytics community for credit unions talking, getting together and having some truly exceptional content by speakers that include a bunch of previous TUG presenters. And I did just want to pass on, and I will be putting it in the chat, the hosts and leaders of that, Naveen Jain and company, have offered a set of different discount options. So if you'd like a free session pass for the event for the summit, you can either use the trial membership, which will give you access to a whole bunch of additional resources, or you can do the free summit pass only. Either of these will get you to the summit and allow you to get viewing all of the fabulous content that is going to be coming up. There is a set of links and a couple of codes coming at you in the chat. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. It should be a very fun event. I also put together, just based on some questions and topics that have come up in the last few meetings, a couple of resources. We've got a very interesting article here, which goes through the story of how Texas Trust has been using Power BI to evaluate member data. And you can see a little screenshot here. And these are hyperlinks that will be in the deck that we're providing. We also had a bunch of questions about how to use dashboard containers better in Tableau. And there's both a guide here as well as a Tableau public viz that goes through really nice step-by-step instructions that can help you get the best of it pretty quickly, as well as a couple other resources here. So this will be going out with the deck and recording in the next few days. So hopefully that is useful to you. Now, on to the main event. Today, we've got Nicole Lopez and joined by Knowlton, who has been her partner in crime for a lot of the interesting conversations we're going to have today. Logix is based out in Burbank, California. I believe, if I've got my numbers right, which I certainly hope I do, or I'll be in trouble here at work, is about 7.6 billion as of the end of 2020. And if you'd like to take a look at the overall industry averages, you've got this in the deck. And so without further ado, I just wanted to thank Nicole and Brewster in advance for taking the time to present today, and I will hand over to them. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Brewster. And again, folks, please go ahead and put any questions in the Q&A box. And I did just find out that I think I have been pasting my links in the wrong chat, so I will send those out in one moment. Thanks, and over to you, Brewster.
All right. Thank you, Charlotte, and thank you everyone participating. I'm really excited for you all to see what Nicole and her team have done. So I'm going to keep my part here as quick as possible so we can get to the good stuff, but lay the foundation for the evolution of Logix, why they approached us, what our platform did for them. And then Nicole's going to drive really some fantastic things about how they've been able to leverage it and use it for ways we never even anticipated, which is awesome. So without further ado, I'll jump into this quick and get us over to Nicole's content as quickly as possible. So you're going to hear this term VeriCU data platform quite a bit over the next hour. And that's the Knowlton Group's data warehouse solution that's deployable on-prem or in the cloud. And it provides that complete integration platform for all of your critical data, both core and non-core systems. And there are 5 key things that we wanted to highlight about the platform, and many of them are relevant to the Logix implementation specifically. The first is that it's pre-built with that 70 to 80% that is consistent from credit union to credit union. That's specific to core. So we'll see some examples of certain tracking records and warning codes from Logix being a scimitar shop that are unique to them, that build into that logic that's consistent across all scimitar credit unions so that they can get up and running quick and don't have to conform to a different type of semantic layer that's different if you're on Ultradata or correlation or DNA. We wanted a solution to be rapidly deployable. In some cases, as little as 72 hours, depending on the client setup. So something that didn't take months, but took truly just days or weeks to get up and running. Completely customizable, as you'll see in some of the visualizations that Nicole will provide. We wanted to ensure that their data governance and their specific fields and definitions that they used were built into the platform. We always say it's not our warehouse, it's the credit union's warehouse. So making it as specific as possible and adhering to their data governance. And you'll see some great examples of that. It's deployable on-prem or in the cloud. Logix, for example, is deployed on-premise, and we have some plans to migrate that. So there'll be some fun things happening later this year. But we wanted to have the flexibility for credit unions that weren't quite ready to dip their toes into cloud, but still wanted to be able to migrate there down the road. It's a flexible solution, so you don't have to make the decision now and be stuck there forever. And then lastly, it comes with the integrated analytic applications around things like member engagement, profitability analysis, some attrition prediction models. So getting into that analytics layer as opposed to being a purely traditional business intelligence and reporting environment. So that kind of lays the groundwork for what was deployed at Logix. Now, Logix had similar challenges to many of you on the call and like many credit unions. And there's, of course, a lot of challenges around data within the credit union industry. But I would say it boils down to 4 key things that tend to surface more frequently than others. The first and foremost, and quite frankly, is the key concept around today's discussion, disparate data. There are silos of data all over the place, and it makes it very difficult to report either efficiently or sometimes even accurately on that data. So that had to be overcome. Second, limited data governance exists. If I go to many of your credit unions and ask how many members do you have or how many active members do you have, if I ask marketing, I'll get a different response than say in retail ops, and then a different response in lending, and maybe a different response in finance. So how do we add the layers of definitions and data governance into the platform so that when Nicole and her team are creating content or others are consuming that content, they're pulling down and having a consistent definition for those key terms? So that was a big challenge. And of course, really as a byproduct of the first two, inefficient report development comes into play. It's harder to get things done quickly. The common term we hear now is data wrangling, right? If you're an analyst on this webinar right now, how much of your time do you spend truly analyzing data versus wrangling and manipulating it? am guessing it's probably 70 to 80% wrangling. We wanted to flip that. So how can we get a platform that enables as minimal wrangling and manipulation as possible to focus more on efficient scaling and deployment of the content that we really want to deliver? And then, of course, when there's less data available, readily available in a format to help drive decisions, it leads to more instinct and less data-driven decision-making. So these are the challenges that Logix face, and to some extent, of course, every credit union is still going to face as they roll through that maturity curve. But I've been impressed tremendously by what that team has been able to do in overcoming these challenges and really use this as the platform that it can be. And so, of course, by integrating this data, embedding governance, simplifying the reporting. I mentioned warning codes, tracking records are a big pain point if you're a scimitar shop. That model kind of makes that easier for them to access. And then getting from reporting to analytics. And you're going to see, Nicole and I actually didn't even plan this. When I saw her slides, it's really walking through from reporting into true analytics. And you're going to see that transition happen over the next 30, 40 minutes here. Because the topic is around centralization and integration, it made sense to discuss the integrations we have at Logix's VeriCU implementation. And as you can see, it's a pretty expansive list. Core, consumer LOS, mortgage LOS, a lot of systems that have some ancillary but significant value around marketing, servicing details. And so we wanted to get a grasp of all these critical systems to be able to simplify that reporting to bridge the gap from, say, origination to servicing without having to go into separate systems or know exactly how the account number appears in this system and exactly how it appears over here. Those challenges we needed to resolve. And I think you'll see some great use cases for how that was done. And my last point, as we see, is someone tries to use a wrench to screw in a nail. I don't care how great of a system someone puts out there. And while we have great confidence in our system, it really took a fantastic team and a user group that knew how to take advantage of it and to maximize the value. And so Logix is the perfect example of a credit union that is not the wrench in this situation, but knew exactly how to use it. And it's been incredible to see that this platform is really only as good as the people whose hands you put it into. And fortunately, this is where I get to turn it over to Nicole, who's going to highlight exactly how Logix has been able to take advantage of this even better than we maybe even expected. So Nicole, this is where I kick it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the flattering comments. Let me switch it over to my screen. All right. Just as a funny anecdote, before this meeting, I told Brewster that I didn't even recognize that was a wrench. And so even though handiwork is not my forte, I would like to think that data is. So on that note, thank you all so much for joining today. Really excited to be talking about how the Knowlton Group's platform really helped us lay the groundwork for a lot of our analytics projects. And as we go through this, you'll see that we've been able to apply it not just towards what people normally think of with dashboards and things like that, but we've really been able to use the platform to do some really cool things in the advanced analytics space as well. So then moving quickly, just to go over what we're gonna talk about today, I'll go over briefly who we are, who Logix is, and who's on the team, briefly discuss the Logix data journey, and then where the fun stuff comes in, go over some of our example use cases, discuss some best practices that we've learned along the way, and then open it up for some Q&A. So going into this, I wanted to pull an interesting stat that I thought was interesting, especially when we think about people throwing around big data and using things like Hadoop and things like that. This stat shows that 95% of firms in 2020 cited that unstructured data was one of the biggest problems for their business. And I think that's why it was so important for Logix to get a solution in order to structure our data, because when you're dealing with as many sources as Brewster put up previously, it can get really unwieldy. And you might end up in a situation where you might have a data swamp and not a data lake, or whatever scenario you may be in. So that's a little bit to preface why this is such an important topic for us. A little bit about Logix. Charlotte said this, but we are based in Burbank, so it is very sunny here right now. I have my AC on currently. We were founded in 1937 as Lockheed Federal Credit Union, I think a lot of people still remember us as Lockheed Federal Credit Union. We're over 7 billion in assets, actually probably approaching closer to 8 billion, as you saw in the previous slides, and we have over 200,000 members. One of the things that we're really proud of as a company is that we've been nominated as, or we've won Forbes Best in State Credit Union since 2018. A little bit about me. I am the manager of business intelligence here at Logix. I've had 10 years of experience in banking. I started off as a teller. Thank goodness that I didn't stick around. I was always out of balance. I then moved into the project management space where I got a lot of experience working in many different technical projects and learning a lot about all of the cross-functional areas of the company. I have my bachelor's in science in business from University of Redlands, and I am currently attending UCLA Anderson to get my MBA. And then on to the important people, which are the data and analytics team. So I know that a lot of times there's questions about how is the team structured, so hopefully this gives you a sense of which positions we have and how they contribute to the overall objective of the department. So John Raymer is our Chief Communications and Strategy Officer, and he oversees our department. Joey is our Assistant Manager of Data Management, so he's working a lot in terms of making sure that we have good data governance and data management practices. Michelle West is our Senior Business Analytics Analyst. She's the person that put together the really beautiful Tableau dashboards that you're going to see later on in this presentation. Dave is our ETL developer. He's done a lot of work helping us wrangle some different data sets and worked closely with Brewster to make sure that we have the data that we need. Erica is checking out all of the quality of our data. As you guys know, data quality is huge, especially in the financial services space. And Jordan is our data management analyst. He works really closely with our stakeholders to gather requirements and really understand the goals of the business. So we're a relatively new department, and I'll give you a brief rundown of where we were, how we started, and where we're at today. Back in 2018, the company realized that there was a really large opportunity to use our data and leverage it to make better business decisions. And we, at the time, conducted a data maturity assessment to really begin that process of planning what BI would look like at Logix. And so we partnered with CMMI Institute, who surveyed all the departments all over the credit union. We had a huge turnout for the workshops that we held and really learned a lot about how people were managing their data. And I will say one of the overarching themes was that people had to gather data from a bunch of different sources and put it together in Excel worksheets, do a lot of manual work. In 2019, based off of that information, we made a roadmap that encompassed data management, BI, and advanced analytics, because we knew that we needed to balance deliverables in all those three areas in order to provide value to the business quickly. Also in 2019, we began working on a data warehouse project with the Knowlton group. One of the big selling points of working with Brewster and his team is that he was already very familiar with all of the systems that we used. And so we assessed a lot of different players when it came to looking at this, and it really made sense to go with him because of his breadth of experience with credit union data. And in 2020, as you all know, COVID happened, so it kind of threw us for a loop, but it definitely helped us to implement some really key projects and accelerated our deliverables quite a bit. So to give you all some context, I'm sure that a fair amount of you have seen some version of this at some point, which is the data maturity curve. And so back in 2018, we were really in this raw data phase. Standard reporting happened here and there, but it wasn't something that was enterprise-wide. And then in between having standard reporting and really robust BI visualizations is when we made the decision to implement an enterprise data warehouse with Brewster. And that really kicked off the ability to do some of the other things that you see on this maturity curve. So since then, we've been able to build out a lot of robust BI visualizations for a lot of different groups all over the credit union. And we've now moved into the predictive analytics space where we've been able to use that same data to figure out what's going to happen next and what are our members likely to do. Further up that maturity curve, and where I'm sure we'll still be using this same data, is looking at prescriptive analytics, where we figure out what the best decision is to make based off of advanced analytics techniques. And then who knows, maybe someday we'll even get into this autonomous system space. So why centralized data to begin with? It really does, again, create that foundation in order to do all those cool, fancy analytics things that everyone is always talking about. It provides fast and efficient access to many data points. As you saw on Brewster's slide, we have a ton of different systems, and trying to wrangle that data together to paint a picture without having a data warehouse is really, really inefficient. Again, it can serve as a launching point for many analytics projects. We've used it in many different ways and plan on continuing to use it for many additional projects this year. It gets data into the hands of end users faster. Before, we may have had to go to a lot of different departments to gather information. It could have taken a long time depending on how clean that data was. And so this has really helped us to accelerate our progress with gathering and analyzing data. And it allows you to have a full view of all of the data to make better decisions. So we're not just looking at core, we're looking at somebody's marketing touch points. We're looking at their online banking logins, all of that good stuff together to really get a sense of who our members are. Some key facts about the Logix data warehouse. It does combine all of our core data. One of the biggest improvements that we've seen from having the data warehouse is that we can track all of the tracking records from Scimitar. So for those of you that are Scimitar shops, you know that tracking records can be really, really difficult to analyze if you are super custom. So this has really helped us to pull all of the disparate data points together from the core. Again, we have many sources across many different disciplines. And then probably most important of all, it's very highly custom. As Brewster alluded to, we have a lot of custom business rules and processes that we account for in that data warehouse. And it just makes things a lot more consistent and makes things make a lot more sense for our end users when they're in there pulling data. So this is, I'm sure, what most of you want to look at, which is leveraging the Logix data warehouse and all of the cool use cases we've had. So I'll jump right in. So this first one I wanted to show off was how we tackled COVID and really understanding loan delinquency and forbearances. As you all know, the CARES Act went out sometime last year at the start of the pandemic, and it really threw us for a loop because of how many extension agreements and forbearances had to be granted. And so it was really critical for us to be able to track that correctly and to get a better understanding of what our potential risk is. So this is a sample snapshot of one of the things that we've built, which shows consumer loan products and the associated delinquency rates with each spread out over time. So you can see, where things are starting to dip and where, you may have some more extension agreements making the delinquency look a little lower, or where things start to rise where some of those extension agreements might be expiring and people may be moving into later stages of delinquency. So we look at this all the time. We look at this with accounting all the time. And it's really been a useful tool for us to really get a grasp on what's going on in our consumer loan portfolio. And then the next one here is driving revenue growth through sales reporting. This is one of my favorite dashboards because it really shows how much data we have that we can put together from the data warehouse. This encompasses data from Scimitar tracking records, and Meridian Link. So for those of you that have Meridian Link, you know that that data is pretty heinous, but Brewster has been able to put it together in a way for us to be able to really dig into application activity. And our sales team uses this on a daily basis to go in and look at potential opportunities. So for example, is our approval to book ratio lower than it should be? And do we need to maybe call members to see, hey, your application is approved. Do we want to take the next step and actually book the loan? There's a ton of different metrics in here, which are really cool. We have it broken down by loan purpose, a map that shows the geography of where all of these applications are and whether or not they're booked or just approved but not booked. And as you can see on the right-hand side, a lot of different filters here for us to be able to slice and dice the data in many, many different ways. Another cool part of this reporting set is looking at sales reporting by the time the application comes in. Depending on how large your screen is, this might be a little bit blurry, so I'll try and walk you through it. But it does have application counts by the time of day and the day of the week, percentage of applications per the part of day, and then broken down in monthly and daily trends. So this really allows us to see, hey, are we getting a huge influx of applications on Saturdays, and do we need to staff up there? Or is there somewhere where there's a better opportunity for us to streamline applications and the processes for a certain time of day? And so again, this is one of those things that has a really practical use and gets looked at quite a bit. Another thing that we have done recently that I'm really happy with is analyzing new product lines and looking specifically at business accounts. So we have a program to launch business services to our members, and we had a product line way back when that was a legacy version of business services. And so we've been able to segment all of those different business account types based off of when they were originated, what type of entity they are, product type, market area, all that good stuff, so that we can really see, is this program doing what we expected to? Is it growing at the rate that we expected to? What opportunities are there to book more business accounts and all that good stuff. Again, some additional information about business accounts. So we have year-over-year trends of all the different segments, balance trends, new account trends. And as you can see here, we're doing pretty well because the majority of the business accounts have been originated in this past year, which is awesome. And last use case here that I wanted to share was using the data warehouse for advanced analytics. This is one of the things that I thought was pretty exciting. We were able to pull data from the data warehouse and use it in our machine learning tools to identify people who didn't need to get sent to a third-party collector. And so we built out a dashboard that added in the cost of sending the loan out to the third-party collector, what it costs for an internal collector to service that call instead, and the amount of time that it takes for us to collect on that loan. And so by putting in all this information, we're able to see what prediction threshold makes sense for us to hold back from that third-party collection queue, and what kind of ROI does that look like based off of how many we hold back and what those loans look like. So here in this very small sample set, we see a savings of $1,104 just by holding some people back from the collections queue that are probably going to pay their loan anyways, and they're just those people that always like to pay late. Again, moving into some additional metrics around the collections use case, we were able to look at which attributes most likely correlate to people who are going to pay their loan regardless of whether or not a collector calls them or not. And so we can see the usual suspects in here, like FICO, how many times they've been late in the early stage versus late, what their payment looks like, their balance, and things like that. So again, really good dimensions that we were able to pull into here to really understand what those people look like. And this is another version of this. So we took our predicted versus actual results. And again, we were able to pull this from the data warehouse because we have those two snapshots in time. So we have something where we look at what we predicted to happen, and then we can do a look back to see what actually happened and how accurate were our predictions. So again, for this very small test in the initial round, we had 84% accuracy, and we were able to measure that really quickly. And we've been able to use this dashboard on an ongoing basis and just refresh it based off of any new information that we have. And finally, just some best practices that we've learned along the way. One of the things that I think is most important is goal alignment. One of the things that someone on my team brought up was a story about how his father sold shoes and always asked himself, does it sell shoes? Well, you should always ask yourself, is what I'm doing in support of the business. And so if you're doing something that is a dashboard for something that nobody's really going to look at and doesn't have a whole lot of impact, it might be worthwhile to take a step back and say, does this really support the business outcomes that we're looking to achieve? Next thing, start small. Brewster was able to spin up the data warehouse in a matter of weeks with all of the core data and some of the key LOS systems. You don't need to have 12 systems in place to be able to do something really exciting. A lot of what you just saw is based off of 1 or 2 systems each, and those really tell a story, even just off a couple sources. Kind of in that same vein, keep it simple. I say this a lot in our department. Something that we can do today is a lot more valuable than something we can do in 6 months from now. So if you have the data, if it's there and it's something you can put together that provides value, it probably makes sense to tackle that now. And you don't need to spin up this huge, crazy analytics project to get really quick business value out of something. And the last thing here that I think we've all learned from COVID is pivot quickly. We started 2020 with a lot of different projects that we were trying to achieve, and that totally changed within the first quarter. So, it's going to happen no matter what environment we're in, but I think it is really important to understand that the landscape changes all the time. Technology changes all the time, and business priorities change all the time. So you really have to be prepared to move on from a project based off of shifting priorities. And in some cases, just cut your losses and move on to the next thing. Again, that should always be in support of the business objectives. And hopefully by being able to do that, you'll get there a little quicker. And that said, I did want to leave some time for Q&A. And again, I want to thank you all for joining, and hopefully you got something valuable out of what we had to share.
Gosh, thank you. No, Nicole, I would be an understatement to say it was fantastic. And I think we are definitely not done because there are a lot of questions and I anticipate more coming in. I've got a bunch to run through here. So please, folks on the phone / on your computer, go ahead and pop them in the QA box. But Nicole, one of the questions here, and obviously Brewster, chime in as you'd like. An anonymous attendee asked you, Nicole, whether your analytics team is centralized, or are there analysts sort of scattered in other departments? And then if you think there's any pros or cons to how you are set up.
That's a really good question, and something that, quite frankly, we think about all the time. So we do have a set of analysts that are centralized in the department, and we have a good mix of people who were brought in from other departments who had a lot of good analytics skill, as well as people from the outside who brought in some of the technical skills in BI from elsewhere. And so as a team, we're relatively small, but we have a lot of expertise in a lot of different areas. That said, there is analysts spread out throughout the company still in key areas of the organization. So I will say that it's sometimes a challenge because those groups may be reporting on something and we're reporting on something similar. Our data sources might not be the same, and it's kind of the same old data governance story of people have different numbers in different areas. And there's benefits to both ways, and I really think it has to do with how your organization wants to tackle analytics. If you have everyone centralized, obviously everyone is learning from each other. They can give each other tips on best practices, as well as bring in the expertise from all the different business units that they come from. That said, if you have everyone decentralized, now you can have resources that are really dedicated to one specific area. And that might really accelerate the analytics in that one particular vertical. So in some cases that might make sense. For example, if you really need to have someone that deals specifically with residential loans, for example, it might make sense to have a dedicated analyst there who just works really closely with the analytics team to make sure that we're all using the same set of data.
From a semi-outside perspective, I see that the background of the Logix team, having been involved with other areas, tends to really resonate well. And sort of anecdotally, I hear that. So there's a couple people there that were at other parts of the credit union. So those areas of the credit union trust this individual or these individuals really well. And so the questions around adoption and participation and trust, I think that really helped. And correct me if I'm wrong, Nicole, but I see a lot of benefits by having that past involvement with other departments in the analytics team to help garner that trust as they roll it out.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that statement.
Also related to sort of team structure, we had a question on specifically regarding your data quality analyst. Do they handle reporting and resolving any data issues specifically?
Yes, Erica is our data quality guru. So she will go through and validate some of the data sets that we pulled from the warehouse against existing reporting. So in the example I used before, where there's maybe some data governance issues between one group reporting one thing and we're reporting something else, she really digs in and tries to identify what those differences are. And oftentimes it just comes down to a business rule. So it's not that the warehouse is wrong. It's not that the other group is wrong. It's that there's some nuance in the way something is being calculated. And so I would say that that position is invaluable. I mean, it's super valuable because, again, going back to trust, you want people to get the analytics and trust that the numbers are correct. And without that, you might put something out that's completely wacky and no one's ever going to want to look at your reports again.
The one source of truth, double-edged sword. Thank you. From Mark, who asked this, whether Nicole could speak a bit more about the CMI Institute they're using for certain credit union efficiencies.
Sure. I'm actually not sure that they are still doing assessments. I'd have to dig up some more information, or I'm not sure if the consultant that we use is still with them, but they were a group that was based out of Carnegie Mellon that is similar to the group that put together the DIMBOK. And so a lot of expertise in a lot of different areas of data management specifically. And they were able to come in and do a lot of interviews and gather a lot of information about our practices and then apply that to all of the data management principles and essentially create a gap analysis of where we were and where we wanted to be. And I thought that was really valuable just to get a baseline of what type of work we needed to do to get to where we wanted to be. I would highly recommend doing a similar assessment to anyone that's just starting out. I think it also sheds a lot of light on business practices and any potential risk that you may have in implementing a data program.
There's two questions here that are kind of paired. So I'll start with one and then tell you the other one and you can work through. The first one was, how is reporting delivered to stakeholders and report users throughout the company? And then I think this pairs well with it, which is, how did you get user adoption as well as requirement participation across departments?
Yeah, really good questions. So we primarily use Tableau. And so when people are getting reports from us, they're getting a link to a Tableau dashboard. They can set up subscriptions, all that good stuff. And so it has made it relatively simple that there's one place to go if you need to get analytics from our group. Adoption, can be kind of dicey, and I think it still is dicey to this day. And I think that no matter what organization that you're in, there's always going to be some friction when it comes to using new sources of data or new tools to analyze data. And, thankfully, as a company, we've always been really good at having a ton of data and doing a lot of analysis. And that has really helped us be positioned in a good spot to get people to adopt what we're putting together, as well as to get them really involved in requirements. We have a lot of people with a lot of experience who know exactly what they want. They go into those sessions and they have some KPIs in mind that they'd like to see. So I do think that that does help. One of the things that I've noticed recently that works really well for groups that may need some help in the requirements area is to maybe put a mock-up together, put a simple dashboard together based off of what we know of their high-level business needs. And then that way they have something to work off of instead of trying to come up with a request from scratch themselves.
Excellent. We got a question here, which was the change that began several years ago that you outlined history-wise, was this driven by the IT department or from elements of the business? How did the effort to create a BI department come together?
That's a really good question. It came from our finance team. So Anna, who was the CFO at the time, and John Raymer, who is our chief strategy officer. So we're not actually in IT like some other BI groups. We're in the strategic services division. And I think that has served us really well because it keeps us very aligned to business strategy. And I know that wouldn't work for all credit unions and all organizations, But I will say it has kept us really close to understanding what the priorities of the company are at any given moment. And going back to something I said earlier, it's allowed us to pivot a lot more quickly because we have a seat at the table in those conversations. We're always have an ear to what's going on in the companies from a strategic perspective. And I think, at the end of the day, data is not an IT resource, it's a business resource. And that would be my 2 cents on why that's worked so well for us.
Yeah, and they've been really successful in looking at it from a holistic, again, strategic standpoint, given that it falls under the chief strategy officer. I find that some organizations that are maybe it started in, let's say, marketing or in IT or in a very specific area might tend to be really good at that thing, but maybe fall short in other areas. So the fact that they were built in a lot of ways from the ground up to focus as an enterprise-wide initiative, I think helped them, from at least what I've seen, gain a lot of success in a relatively short period of time.
Wonderful. We've got several questions about different elements of data governance here, which does not surprise me, a very hot topic. So Dan brought up the question. So data governance is built in to the platform here. So how do you handle accountability in terms of data ownership? And is there any kind of formalized data governance program among the people participating?
We don't have a formalized data governance program, and we do plan to, probably not this year, but sometime next year. But one of the things that I've learned along the way when it comes to data governance is it's really easy to fall in the trap of trying to boil the ocean. Something that I've learned working alongside Brewster and our team is sometimes you just have to take it request by request. So the sales dashboard, for example, can we validate all that data and can we make sure that it's quality and that people are inputting things the way that they're supposed to be inputting things? And start just from one vertical and take it in small chunks. We don't do a whole lot in terms of going back to the front end users to correct dirty data, but we do, as much as possible, try to set up automated programs and things like that in order to make sure that the data is at least clean somewhat. And then I think in a future stage, we'll be a little bit more, we'll have more capacity to deal with those front end user data quality issues.
We did have someone who asked, and I don't know, maybe they are marketing data analysts themselves, but wanted to know if you have any marketing data analysts sort of dedicated or with specialization.
We don't have anyone dedicated to marketing analytics in our group. There is a marketing analyst in the company who is really, really awesome at data. And so he's someone that I could actually see us, and we do partner really closely with him. And so in that situation, it maybe does make sense for him to be decentralized out of the department because he works so closely with the specific data set. And at some point, what we'd like to do is to get him connected to the warehouse so that way he can start pulling in some of those data sources into the marketing area and really making more use of a broader set of data.
To go back to governance for a second, Jeff had a question, which was, they often run into the situation of having manual adjustments required for data that doesn't match the core, et cetera. And yes, it is a governance issue, but do you guys offer any solutions that really allow for how you do these kinds of manual adjustments in terms of solving, in the context of all the governance tracks?
Absolutely. One of the things that we came across is with the delinquency reporting, there is a reconciliation period for accounting that lasts a few weeks. And there might be issues where the cutoff time in Scimitar doesn't capture a loan payment, or we may have reversed a repossession or something along those lines. And so Dave, the developer on our team, built out a custom application where the accounting team can quickly go in and make adjustments to the loan portfolio directly through the app. And that is something that we're really excited about because the prior process to that was to type everything up in an Excel document and upload that. And so we're hoping to see more situations where we can do something like have a custom app for users to use. That way it makes it feel less technical and just more something that becomes part of your day where you open up the app, you put in your corrections, and that's part of your process.
I've got another question here, and this is fairly specific. But are you able to speak to any specific sort of certificate CD business use cases or questions that might be a project your team is currently working on or that might have come up? This is particularly relevant right now with the low rate environment. So we've got some curiosity there. If that had
we don't. And I will say that because liquidity is just not an issue for us at this very moment in time. And so we haven't done any specific CD use cases. That said, that's not to say that things won't change and the environment won't change, but it's just not something that we have currently. Now, that said, there is some interest in understanding the transactions by channel as well as the applications by channel. And so as part of that, we will have CDs as an element in there just to show how many CDs are being opened and where are they getting opened from, and things like that. So indirectly, yes, but not directly.
Wonderful. Richard had a question, which was, can you speak to how you figured out and determined how you prioritize projects and requests when you first really went live with the visualization component of things?
Yes, again, a really good question, because I think that's something that we all struggle with. There's more requests than there is people to finish those requests. And so one of the processes that we have in place is to have an executive steering committee. And I have found, because the program is so new and because we're still ramping up, that it's been a really useful place to do prioritization with all the leaders of the different business areas. And so we meet on a regular basis every 3 weeks or so and go over outstanding requests, prioritize those requests, and make changes as the environment changes. And that keeps us really agile, and we're able to pivot quickly when maybe something that was important a few months ago, maybe is something that we can put on the back burner. So that's how we do it. We also have a really robust project management scoring system as well. So some of our larger use cases will go through that, where there's a business value score assigned to something. We look at the level of effort and then come up with a score for that project overall, and then we'll rank it against everything else that we want to do.
Just one thing to add on to that, I would say the credit unions I've personally seen have a lot of success with data, have that top-down support, like Nicole mentioned, whether it's an executive steering committee or just an organizational strategic priority, an initiative around data. This is one thing that I don't care how good of a system you have or how fantastic of a team you have in place, it really is never going to be successful, or rarely will be successful as a bottom-up initiative, because you're never going to get that buy-in to actually use this data as a decision-making asset. It becomes more a confirmation bias mechanism if it's bottom-up, because you don't have that senior leadership bought in. So some things that I've seen in having conversations with John and other members of Logix executive team, they buy into it, they get it, and that's enabled Nicole's team, and vice versa. They feel that enablement, which directly translates back into success. So that's something that, as a takeaway for everybody, whatever system you use, whatever core, doesn't matter. If you have that top-down support, you're going to get far better success than you will if it's really trying to be a grassroots movement.
Jim had a paired set of questions that I actually think work well together, which was, first off, how have your team worked to separate themselves from just being a reporting engine? And then with that, and this strikes me, especially given what you're talking about in terms of executive prioritization, what drives the direction to search and analyze, and how do you trend? Jim notes here that data is great, but what you do with it is more important. How do those tie together?
Absolutely. It is really easy to fall into the trap of just doing reports all day, every day. But I think one of the things that's really going for us is that we have an openness towards experimenting with advanced analytics. And that is where I see us going from just describing what happened to now thinking about what's going to happen and what do we need to do about it. And as part of our process for analyzing those use cases, one of the very, very first questions we ask is, what are you going to do with that data? If it's just, I want to know, then that's not going to be a good enough reason for us to pursue that. There needs to be a plan of action of what you're going to do with that information. And it should be something that, again, supports the company's strategy and the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. So for example, if you wanted to mitigate risk and wanted to get buy-in on something like that, it might be worthwhile to ask, what are you going to do with it? And then have the business unit explain, well, we're going to reach out to people we think are going to go into late stages of delinquency and work out some kind of payment plan with them. So that way you can start to piece together what the implementation will look like and hopefully put some rough numbers around ROI and things like that.
We've got two pretty specific questions that I think might be useful for folks. Kelly had brought up that they're onboarding a data analyst in the next couple of weeks. And so far, they've really focused on their MCIF system, which I think is very common, very normal. But they really want this position to help the credit union get smarter and more efficient. They're also in Scimitar. Do you have any tips in terms of integrating a platform like this when they're very much starting out?
Again, I would say start simple. Start with the core. Brewster's platform does that really well. He has a lot of experience with Scimitar, and we were able to start using that information weeks after he put it up. And so, I don't think that you need to recreate MCIF. I don't think that you need to blow up the scope so much that it's so overwhelming. Think of those few use cases that you can come up with that really provide a lot of impact. If you're a credit union that is seeing some issues with liquidity, maybe you do need to do some CD and money market reporting or something along those lines, or come up with something to support that and work with business units to come up with those ideas so you can get buy-in. And again, I would say very much so keep it simple. It's really easy to go down this path of thinking you have to boil the ocean. And if you spend all your time doing that, you're going to miss some of those quick wins.
Yeah, and on top of that, when you're onboarding somebody new or looking at, I don't want to say transitioning off of an MCIF into a platform or something along those lines, but if you start smaller and then slowly and incrementally build, you're able to validate and gain comfort with that new platform and start to change the delivery method from the existing tool into the new one. So without people even realizing that they're being onboarded onto a new system of information as that central source, they are, and it can be a slow migration that allows you to onboard in an incremental process without, again, overloading. We have a lot of systems at Logix, but it's taken time to get those because everyone has a use case. And then each time we're able to build off of it. So it's certainly been a process, as it should be. If you do too much at once, it's going to be very overwhelming.
A question that is coming up a lot and that we actually really want to focus on in the next, in this year of credit union analytics, including the Tableau group webinars is, so this is fantastic, but Logix is a very big credit union. I think that, Nicole, you've been doing a great job of distilling things that are actually very much like everybody has to go back to a certain level of basics and understanding to get moving. Do you have any, this could be very much for either of you, any tips that can be really actionable for folks at smaller credit unions, which I think is probably most people on the call. Although I am at a vendor, am a team of two, so I have the feel that maybe really things we can grab onto and take from this webinar that can be useful. The team is the dream, but for now it may be one or two people. What can we do to really get things moving and be impacting and serving the member?
I'll just say before I pass it off to Brewster, because he probably has more experience working with smaller credit unions, that it may actually be a hindrance to be a large credit union because we have so many systems, we have so many employees, and we have really complex processes in some cases. And so it's in certain instances will make it a lot more difficult for us to implement something because there is so much to consider and so much impact. So in some ways, getting started now when a credit union is smaller might actually be super beneficial because you can tackle something, get the framework for having a long-term data strategy in place without the environment being overwhelmingly complex.
Yeah, I think if you're a smaller credit union, before you even look at, which is the last thing you want to hear from a salesperson standpoint, but don't look at a platform to start off. I mean, there's benefits to it, sure, but if you don't have a visualization tool, start with that, because let's say you are, look at the cores like DNA or correlation or some of the others, even if you're a Scimitar shop and you have RQ deployed, so you have that RQ SIM database to be able to reference, even without a platform in place, you can start to get that visualization. And that's the transition, is it's the consumption method. The data warehouse, the data platform, whatever term you want to apply to it, is just a database. And as an executive, you don't care where it's coming from, as long as you're seeing the information the way that you want. So don't focus initially on that underlying architectural design. I mean, to a point, it gets to a scenario where you might want to start looking at that, but look at Tableau, look at Power BI, look at those other visualization tools, get that in place. And I think you'll start to see some incremental success. And as Nicole said a number of times, keep the scope small. Focus on, even if it's in the beginning, just say three things that we want to accomplish this year, and then get that. And then you start to gain some trust. Maybe you have power users in a little bit more of a decentralized analytics environment, and you can grow the use cases without necessarily growing the internal data specific team. And yeah, it might be a longer process, but you probably won't have nearly as much extraneous fluff that you'd look at and say, okay, that was a waste, or we could have better allocated our time.
Fantastic. And I couldn't agree more. You know, what does the CFO really want in one report? An actionable report. And then, yeah, build up. Get people to love what you want, create an appetite, and then scale. Colin asked Nicole whether you can speak to any mistakes that Logix made in the journey that has helped you understand and improve how you're doing.
You know, one of the things that I think that we could have done better is to set up more data governance protocols to start, because it is really hard to go back and fix dirty data. That said, you know, it's doable, and we're still in a good place to go back and fix some of those things. But you don't want to get so far down the line that you're dealing with a massive amount of dirty data, because when it comes to, especially when you're getting into the machine learning advanced analytics space, dirty data in is going to be dirty data out, and you might be making crazy decisions based off of faulty data. And so it does make it so we have to spend a little bit extra time doing quality validations on a request by request basis. But we will get to the point where we have a full-blown data governance program, and I think that'll help us a lot as far as taking things to the next step.
Fantastic. We are at the top of the hour, so we are going to stop. There are a couple of unanswered questions, and we will reach out to you. Somebody did have one specific Meridian link question. If you wanted to email me or ping us on the chat, very happy to answer in more depth offline. But I want to respect everyone's time. Thank you so much for joining. But really, thank you to Nicole and Brewster. This was fantastic. I think in the best sense, just like exploring data, now we have more questions than we started with, which is very much a good thing. And excited to see you all later in the spring. And just a sincere thank you both to the Tableau folks who helped us organize, to the whole Logix team, and to Brewster and his folks. Thank you very much. And we will see you at the next hug. Stay tuned for the deck and the recording. And hope to see you in April, if not before. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.